Russia's recent military threats against Ukraine have revived fears of chemical warfare, whereas the COVID pandemic has inflamed conspiracies and paranoia about the spread and creation of deadly pathogens. However, the Russian government asserts that it does not maintain a stockpile of biological weapons, or even that it is illegally developing germs to kill human targets. But given that modern-day Russia had inherited the Soviet Union stockpile, as well as the scientific data behind their manufacture, it's reasonable to conclude that Russia is playing another game of hide the ball. So what's the status of Russia's biological weapons program? Will it usher in the end of the world as we know it, or are the occasional assassinations proof that their bark is worse than their bite? To understand the scale and potential influence of Russia's top-secret scientific research, we need to revisit the beginning of the timeline to understand how we got to where we are today.
We've heard President Biden has warned there are clear signs Russia is preparing to use chemical and biological weapons in Ukraine. He said there's a real danger President Putin could resort to more severe tactics.
It's the start of the 20th century. The world is in turmoil, and the Russian army suffered huge losses in all their major conflicts: the Russo-Japanese War, World War I, and the Civil War between the Red and White forces. Yet, most of their casualties came from disease, not bullets. Even Lenin spoke of the spread of typhoid throughout the trenches and front lines of soldiers. We are suffering from a desperate crisis. A scourge is assailing us, lice and the typhus that is mowing down our troops. Either the lice will defeat socialism, or socialism will defeat the lice. Add to that the fact that Russia had been on the receiving end of the Germans' chemical attacks, and it became clear to them, as well as the rest of the world, that the future of war was rooted in biological agents. So in 1917, when the Bolshevik government took power, they knew they needed a chemical industry, and so the Military Chemical Agency would be unveiled in 1925. This was the military wing of what was initially a joint venture into the chemical benefits for civilians and armies. But as the Soviet Union grew and closed its borders, so the laboratory would adapt and grow in the dark. In typical USSR fashion, the shape, name, and management of the institution would come and go with every purge of Stalin's enemies. Yet the state-funded research facility would exist in some spiritual form whilst steadily upping the technological developments. By 1928, there were 35 different institutions under the department's umbrella, all working in varied disciplines such as epidemiology, genetics, immunology, microbiology, virology, and even plague protection. But it was February 22nd, 1938, that the world would come to learn of Stalin's secret stash of deadly weapons. In her speech to Western media, Marshal of the Soviet Union, Leonid Y. Voroshilov, stated, 10 years ago or more, the Soviet Union signed a convention abolishing the use of poison gas and bacteriological warfare. To that, we still adhere. But if our enemies use such methods against us, I tell you that we are prepared, fully prepared, to use them also, and to use them against aggressors on their own soil. The rules of war had officially changed. Next in the timeline comes the end of World War II. Countries agreed to ban the use and development of biological and chemical weapons following the millions of deaths and rewriting of country borders. From the outside, it seemed like this international pressure would be enough for Russia to move on. After all, nuclear weapons had demonstrated their power during the worldwide conflict, so it seemed like chemical weapons had been superseded. They were a thing of the past now, and besides, Russia hadn't demonstrated their claim to chemical weapons, so perhaps they had missed the boat. In addition, the structure and nature of the Soviet Union meant that the scientific research labs had never been fully integrated into an overseeing conglomerate. That's why it was hard to get high-level decision makers to take an interest in this area of research. The biological and weapons departments were overlooked and sidelined. Furthermore, the negative influence of Trofim Lysenko had crippled the Russian understanding of molecular biology and Darwin's theory of natural selection for decades. So, with Lysenko's state-endorsed and scientifically inaccurate vermalization theory, it seemed like the final nail in the coffin for Russia's program had been put in place, at least for the time being, because during the height of the Cold War, the US would make a mistake that led directly to a push for Russia's next generation of chemical weapons. During the 1960s, the US government undertook a secret deception and the disinformation program aimed at the Soviet Union. The goal? Falsely imply that the US had a clandestine biological weapons program. Rather than subjugate their rival, it actually only reinforced an existing Soviet belief that the US had not terminated its own biological warfare program despite the signed post-World War II agreement. Secret research into chemical agents would continue throughout the Cold War. Now it's 1972, and the program is being spearheaded by the young, bright scientist Ovchinnikov. He had seen how the Politburo was uninterested in matching Western research on genetics, so he persuaded them of the military implications of the research, and thus, almost overnight, the Russians got their program back on track, even though Russia signed up to the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention of 1975. Needless to say, they didn't terminate their programs, but in fact, expanded and stepped them up. Ovchinnikov went on record to say, at the Central Committee of the Communist Party, if we offered 10 drugs, nobody would support us. Nobody would give us money for medicine. But offer one weapon, and you'll get full support. According to Biohazard, a book written by Stephen Handelam and former Soviet biological researcher Ken Elebek, the USSR's extensive bioware programs produced dozens of weaponized strains of viruses such as anthrax, Ebola, and even the plague. There was even weaponization of HIV and AIDS. More evidence for the substantiated conclusions of Russia's research during Cold War era was further explained by L.A. Fedorov, a Russian chemical weapons researcher, in his book, Soviet Biological Weapons, History, Ecology, Politics. One of the most striking compounds developed sometime during these decades was Novochik, then codenamed Foliant. This fourth-generation weapon has never been officially confirmed by any Russian government, but its existence would eventually be revealed by Dr. Vil Mirzayanov, a Russian defector. He even published the chemical formula in his own book.
Dr. Vil Mirzayanov. Я участвовал во всех испытаниях нового отравляющего вещества под названием «Новичок», который 10 раз, по меньшей мере, сильнее, чем известные все отравляющие вещества в мире.
So with Russia increasing the breadth and depth of their bioweapons, it seemed like war was inevitable. And then the Soviet Union collapsed. It's Christmas Day 1991, and the Soviet hammer and sickle flag lowered for the last time over the Kremlin. Boris Yeltsin has just become president of the newly independent Russian state. The future looked bright. Over the next 2 years, a new anti-bioweapon agreement would be drafted and signed, the Chemical Weapons Convention. Yeltsin would even admit that the USSR had been operating an offensive weapons program in violation of the previously signed Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. With all of the leaks, rumors, and investigations now confirmed, this signaled a change in Russia's honesty. Though Yeltsin did try to close the programs, he would be undermined by the Ministry of Defense, which kept the research institutions operating and their work programs top secret. But despite this, Russia and the USA and the United Kingdom would sign another treaty, this time in 1992. The aim was a trilateral statement by which Russia would allow its Western counterparts access to the bioweapons facilities for the purposes of authenticating its dismantling procedure. But history has a habit of repeating itself. Russia didn't deliver on its promise and closed its doors. Then, in 1999, Putin reversed Yeltsin's 1992 admission and instated the official position that ever since the fall of the USSR, Russia never had an offensive bioweapons program, and that all research conducted was in the name of defense, as permitted the original Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. With all the back and forth on treaties and party lines, it was only a matter of time until something got through the cracks. Novichok debuted on the world stage in 1995 during the assassination of Ivan Kivalidi. This compound is so deadly that one spoonful, administered in the right way, can kill thousands. On this occasion, it claimed 2 victims, Ivan and his 35-year-old secretary. The nerve agent was hidden inside the banker's telephone receiver, the irony being that this bioweapon had been developed by one of the departments under his influence. Finally, the world was starting to see the effects of the weapons which Russia had been keeping under wraps for so long. But perhaps it was the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko which captured the public's attention, as the assassination had occurred off Russian soil. Litvinenko was a former KGB officer who'd fled to the UK when he was ordered to kill a Russian businessman. In exile, he publicly criticized Vladimir Putin and his government, and even worked with British and Spanish intelligence to share information on the Russian mafia's presence in Europe and their connections to the Russian government.
My name is Edwin Carter. I am British citizen. In Russian, I have name Alexander Litvinenko.
On November 1st, 2006, he was positioned and hospitalized and died 22 days later from cardiac arrest. Symptoms included intense blisters inside his throat, rendering speaking and eating excruciatingly painful, if not impossible. His hair fell out and he developed heart problems. It wasn't a pretty way to go. By becoming the first confirmed victim of a lethal polonium-210 isotope, he garnered worldwide attention, which amplified his claims against Russia's misdeeds. After all, the chemical is difficult to manufacture and can only be created in a nuclear facility. That requires high levels of security and therefore would require high levels of authority to bypass all safety and manufacturing protocols. Naturally, Putin denied all involvement, then firmly closed all doors of the facility in 2012, leaving outsiders in the dark about what exactly was happening in their scientific research. But speculation about Russia's biowarfare capabilities would be renewed with another assassination attempt, this time in 2018. Salisbury, England, a seaside town far away from the hustle and bustle of its capital. It was here that Sergei Skripal was residing with his daughter. He too was a former Russian operative, but this time was a double agent working for British intelligence agencies. It was the morning of March 4th that Novichok nerve agent would make a reappearance, as both were found unconscious on a public bench. Eyewitnesses claimed the daughter was foaming at the mouth, demonstrating the power of this toxin. Thankfully, both would make a full recovery within weeks, but unfortunately, 2 innocent bystanders were affected in what would become an inconclusive investigation. 2 civilians discovered an abandoned perfume vial and sprayed themselves with the remains. Both were taken to the hospital, but only one survived. Upon inspection, the perfume bottle was revealed to contain enough nerve agents to potentially kill thousands of people. The investigators discovered that the Skiropol household's pets had died through mysterious circumstances, leading to speculation that the poisoning happened there. Roof shingles were dismantled in the hope of uncovering clues, but nothing conclusive emerged. All this goes to show that the manufacturing and distribution of Russia's crowning bioweapon had become more sophisticated in the last few decades, or so we're led to believe. There are more secrets and mysteries yet to be discovered, but until Russia opens its doors, which seems unlikely, we may never know what these bioweapons are truly capable of until it's too late. Let's hope what we've seen so far is the worst to come. But in light of recent conflicts and worldwide pandemics, there's more than enough nightmare fuel to power a vehicle of fear and paranoia. And with a history of failed treaties, it leaves little hope that international diplomacy can finally put an end to these destructive weapons. If you think you have a scoop on Russia's biological weapons program, then please let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy science and espionage stories, then leave a like to let us know you want more. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to get the latest videos. Thanks for watching.